Welcome aboard, brave soul. Tonight, you step onto the deck of a dragon-headed longship, the sea spray biting your face, your hands wrapped tight around an oar because you are now one of them. The Vikings, masters of the seas, raiders of kingdoms, but their greatest strength wasn't just rage. It was something hidden, a weapon so advanced, it reshaped Europe's coastlines forever. If you want to see your name in the credits of my next video, tell me in the comments what era or mystery you want me to explore next. Your idea could be the next legend we uncover. Do you ever feel like there's more to life than what you're currently doing? Like you were meant for something bigger? In this game, those feelings will turn into full-on action as you lead your clan of Vikings in exciting expeditions across the icy seas of the north. You play as a young Norse raider living in a small village nestled between mountains and sea. Your father, Ragnar, is a legendary hero within the community, known for his bravery and strength. She tells you that your father has become weaker since returning from the last raid, and it is your duty as the firstborn son to keep your clan strong and safe. This is how you learn more about the world around you. As the icy waters of the fjord engulf you, you feel a sense of purpose surge through you. The health of your clan, perhaps even their survival, depends on the success of this raid. The other villagers who have joined you on this perilous journey grip their oars tightly, their faces grim with determination. To do this, click on the part of the boat that needs attention. Their longships were marvels of design, capable of swift river travel with their shallow draft, and seafaring prowess with their square sails fully extended. It was a spiritual experience. Many believed that the world was made up of 9 different realms, each connected by the same intricate network of rivers and seas that allowed ships to traverse them. And think about what your next move should be. You won't always have to make big decisions right away. Sometimes you'll have time to gather information and strategize. Use this time wisely. Talk to the villagers. Look around, making offerings to the gods during their voyages and seeking their blessings for safe travels. This game isn't just about clicking randomly and hoping for the best. It's about being thoughtful and making decisions that benefit your clan. The Vikings took these myths seriously and incorporated them into their daily lives. It's about being thoughtful and making decisions that benefit your clan. Whether you choose to continue on or head back, the consequences of your decisions will be felt throughout your journey. The Norsemen were known for their bravery, exploration, and their deep connection to the sea and their gods. Their longships were not just vessels. They were a symbol of their adventurous spirit. By understanding and embracing these aspects of Norse culture, this reverence for the sea and its mysteries led them to explore far beyond their known world. These ships weren't just vessels, she says. When the prompt appears, raiding, with its inherent risks and rewards, became a way to honor the gods and demonstrate one's devotion. By venturing into the unknown, facing dangerous foes and seizing valuable treasures, Norse raiders showcased their courage and strength, which were highly valued in their society. Let's choose to take him out to sea. This blend of spirituality and adventure made raiding more than just a means of acquiring material wealth. It was a way to live a life that was pleasing to the gods and brought honor to the Norsemen. Will you try to continue on to find some of the riches needed to save your father, or will you head back to the safety of the fjord? It was a pathway to new lands, resources, and adventures. This is your first major choice, and it's important to remember that each decision carries weight. Whether you choose to press on or turn back, the consequences will ripple throughout your journey. The Norse believed that the gods were deeply involved in the lives of mortals, and your decisions will often have spiritual ramifications, shaping not only your clan's fate, but also your own destiny. Beyond this point, nothing but legend and myth guide us. She pauses, then adds, "Are you sure about this, my son? We may be venturing into the unknown, but we do so to save our people." Her words echo in your ears as you navigate your vessel through the choppy waters. The sea, once a familiar sight, now seems like a vast, uncharted wilderness, mirroring the uncertainty of your mission. If you find yourself lost or confused, you can always ask them questions, but make sure you don't waste their time with silly questions, or they may become annoyed. For example, some might say things like, "What do you mean? Everyone knows that." Or, "Is that really what you want to hear?" Before you can ponder on your responsibilities, a group of men burst through the door, their faces pale with fear. They tell you that Ragnar has taken a turn for the worse, and it is time to make a decision. Either you must take your father out to sea for one last raid to bring back the treasures needed to appease the gods and heal him, or you must let fate take its course. With Ragnar's life hanging in the balance, you know you have to act fast. You gather your fellow villagers for a meeting. The fate of your clan rests on your shoulders. What will you do? Choose wisely, for every decision you make will shape your journey ahead. But he has recently returned home after an expedition with a mysterious illness, leaving the well-being of the clan in your hands. Lead your people to riches and glory, or watch them die miserable deaths. It's all up to you. The houses are mostly made of wood and thatch, huddled together for warmth and safety against the harsh weather and the dangers of the outside world. The villagers are hardy-looking people with sun-weathered faces and calloused hands, their eyes sharp and wary. There is a somber mood hanging over the village. Since Ragnar's return, the usually boisterous laughter of children at play and the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer have been replaced by hushed whispers and worried glances. So are you ready to take charge of your destiny? Here's how to start. As the game begins, you will be thrown into the world of the Norse, as if you had just time-traveled from the 21st century to the 9th century. As you step into your tall leather boots and sturdy woolen tunic, you can feel the biting wind whipping through the village, carrying with it the smell of salt from the nearby fjords and the faint cries of gulls. Your mother, Astrid, a strong and graceful woman with her father's fierce spirit shining through her gentle eyes, approaches you. The first thing you should do is look around. When you click on things, a small pop-up box will appear giving you additional information. Once you've gathered enough information, speak to Astrid to decide whether to take your father out to sea or not. After a few moments of tense silence, Astrid, her face edged with worry, turns to you. As you venture further, the sky darkens and the wind picks up, signaling an approaching storm. You'll need to make another choice. If you decide to continue on, the storm will hit and you'll have to work with the others to keep the boat steady. In Norse culture, the ocean wasn't just a barrier between them and other cultures. Sailing in Norse mythology was more than just a means of transportation. But why were these raids so important to the Norse? Raiding wasn't just about acquiring wealth or power. Let's go back to the story. But remember, this game isn't just about clicking randomly and hoping for the best. It's a crisp morning, and mist hangs thick over the water, while the sky looks like an old bruise. A hearty breakfast spreads across a rough-hewn table, ready to fuel the day. And there, at the center, lies the legendary Ulfbert sword. First seen in the 8th century, this double-edged, single-handed sword features a slightly curved blade, a long grip, and a pointed tip perfect for both foot soldiers and mounted warriors. What set the Ulfbert apart from other swords was its distinctive fuller or groove which ran along the blade. Only the most elite warriors could afford such an expensive and exclusive weapon, and this made them instantly recognizable on the battlefield. The process of making a weapon was a ritual in itself, and blacksmiths were often seen as having special powers to imbue weapons with magical properties. In fact, some blacksmiths were said to be able to identify valuable ores and minerals that others couldn't find, and they were often consulted for their knowledge of metals and their supposed magical properties. They were extensions of the Viking souls, imbued with their beliefs, values and traditions, from the iconic Sikhs to the legendary Albrechts. Each weapon was a testament to the skill and artistry of the Vikings and their impact on history. The very name Ulfbert was a battle cry that struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. This feature not only made the sword lighter and more agile, but also gave it greater cutting power. Ulfbert swords were typically made from high-carbon steel and were known for their toughness and durability. According to Norse mythology, Wayland was a master craftsman who was enslaved by King Nidam, but he was eventually freed by the god Lerni. In return for his help, Wayland gave Lerni a magical sword called Myodin, which was said to be the best in the world. Another legendary blacksmith was the dwarf Andre the Smith, who was said to have been so skilled that he was able to create magical weapons that were used by gods and heroes alike. They were highly prized by Viking warriors who sought the best weapons available. They were also responsible for making tools, jewelry, and other items that were used in everyday life. In fact, Viking blacksmiths were in high demand throughout Europe, and many traveled to other kingdoms to ply their trade. Their skills were so highly valued that they were often given special privileges, and were even allowed to keep a portion of the valuables that they worked with. In fact, the Albert was so advanced that it remained the standard for elite swords for centuries, far outliving the Viking Age itself. Were forged by elite smiths. The process involved heating the metal to extreme temperatures and hammering it repeatedly until it reached the desired shape. The addition of the fuller required specialized techniques and tools, and the final product was a testament to the skill and expertise of the blacksmith. The popularity of the alfbert spread beyond the Vikings, and these swords were sought after by warriors and nobles across Europe. Their reputation for quality and craftsmanship made them a symbol of excellence, and their distinctive appearance made them instantly recognizable on the battlefield. But the production of the alfbert was not just a technical achievement. It was also deeply rooted in the culture and beliefs of the Vikings. The sword's distinctive name is thought to have come from the Old Norse words ulf meaning wolf and bert meaning bright, perhaps alluding to the sword's ability to flash in the sunlight like a wolf's eyes. This reflects the Vikings' fascination with wolves, which symbolize strength, loyalty, and ferocity. The Vikings also had a deep respect for the natural world, and this was reflected in their choice of materials and their craftsmanship. The high-carbon steel that was used to make the aubreks was known for its strength and durability, but it was also prized for its beauty. The natural patterns and colors of the metal were often left visible in the finished product, and this made each sword a unique work of art. Vikings were super skilled at axe fighting, and their axes were crafted to be both deadly and efficient. There were two main types: the single-handed Dane axe, which was smaller and perfect for close combat, and the two-handed Dane axe, larger and heavier, ideal for taking down multiple foes. Both types of axes were usually crafted from iron or steel and featured long handles, letting warriors strike their foes while staying out of reach. Viking axes weren't just handy tools, they were also powerful symbols of strength and authority. The word berserk actually comes from Old Norse and means bear shirt. It refers to the wild, bear-like rage that warriors would tap into when charging into battle with their axes. Spears were great for throwing at enemies from a distance, but swords were just as powerful up close. For the Vikings, a sword wasn't just a weapon. It was a badge of strength, courage, and freedom. It helped them shape their own paths and carve out their destinies. Swords for the Vikings weren't just tools. They were true works of art. Each one was crafted with care, showcasing the blacksmith's unique skill and creativity. Crafting a sword was like a sacred ritual rite. Blacksmiths weren't just your average craftsmen. They were seen as storytellers and even wizards. The Vikings believed their battle weapons could boost their strength and power, almost like they were magical. This idea came straight from Norse mythology, packed with stories of gods and heroes wielding incredible weapons that granted them amazing abilities. How cool is that? For instance, the legendary Viking warrior Ragnar Lothbrok was said to wield a sword named Gram, believed to have magical powers that made him unbeatable in battle. Whether or not those tales were true, they definitely shaped how the Vikings viewed their weapons and influenced how they fought, allowing them to strike before their enemies got too close. Viking spears were super handy for fending off multiple attackers and blocking incoming strikes. They usually had long wooden shafts with sharp metal tips, sometimes shaped like leaves, and were often paired with shields for extra defense. You know, there are tons of ancient artworks showing Viking battles where warriors are wielding two spears, one in each hand. While a spear might look simple, the Vikings really took pride in crafting them. Many were beautifully decorated with intricate carvings, and some even used elk antlers or other large animal materials. This really shows how connected the Vikings were to the natural world around them. Right. At the head of the table sits a fierce warrior, his thick red beard framing a face full of stories. As he enjoys his meal, he shares tales of his latest victory, recounting how his men cut down the English like wheat before a storm. Suddenly, a servant bows and presents him with a large cloth bag. With a grunt, the warrior opens the bag and pulls out a stunning axe. It has a long handle and a sleek silver inlay running along the blade's edge. This isn't just a tool, it's a symbol of power and a fierce weapon that's helped shape a legend. This is a Viking weapon. Today, we're diving into sixes, a cool short sword that was super popular during the Viking Age. These versatile blades were used for everything from battles to hunting and even special ceremonies. Sixes usually had short, double-edged blades that were broad and flat, perfect for slashing and stabbing. While everyday folks might have used basic iron or steel versions, a high-status warrior could flaunt an elven six. These beauties were crafted from precious metals like silver and gold, often adorned with intricate designs that showcased amazing craftsmanship. One standout example is the Justinian six, named after King Eystein Bjornsson, who rocked it back in the 9th century. How cool is that? The sword is currently on display at the British Museum, and let me tell you, it's a true masterpiece of Viking metalwork. If you're curious about some of the most important weapons the Vikings used and what made them so special, you'll definitely want to check this out. You can also get up close and personal with some of these amazing weapons at the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau, Quebec. A warrior's weapons weren't just tools, they were extensions of their souls. As the Vikings raided, traded, and explored across Europe and beyond, they picked up ideas and weapons from everyone they met. This led to a fascinating blend of styles and techniques that set Viking weapons apart. Each one was carefully crafted and designed to inspire awe and terror in their enemies. But what exactly were these weapons and what made them so special? In the 8th to 11th centuries, one of the most iconic Viking weapons was the seax. Another iconic Viking weapon was the spear. But perhaps no Viking weapon was more revered than the axe. But if the axe was the quintessential Viking weapon, but no sword was more revered among the Vikings than the albert. It was a status symbol. The production of these masterpieces was a closely guarded secret. But the albert wasn't just a weapon. Blacksmiths played a vital role in Viking society. Not only were they skilled craftsmen, but they were also seen as intermediaries between the human and supernatural worlds. Viking weapons were more than just tools of war. One example of a famous Viking blacksmith was the legendary Wayland the Smith. But the skills of Viking blacksmiths were not just limited to making weapons. At the peak of the Viking Age, these warriors had a fierce reputation that echoed across the seas, and their victories felt almost unbelievable. What was the secret to their unbeatable shield wall? They were known for being unbeatable in battle. So, how did this elite Viking crew pull off such amazing victories? Right now, there's a spread of delicious food on the table, but the Vikings still have their eyes on the treasures of the Frankish king. He's pumped to take on the best the Franks can throw at him. As the night goes on, the Vikings laugh, drink, and share tales of their past victories. Both sides stand still, eyeing each other like hawks. The Frankish king's army shows up, boosted by reinforcements from nearby lands. They believe the gods could sway battle outcomes, often calling on them for help before heading into combat. As the first rays of sunlight break through the darkness, there's a moment of stillness. Then, the battle cry rings out, and the two armies collide. Discipline is key here. These warriors have fought side by side for years, sharing a bond that empowers them to face even larger foes. Their shield wall brotherhood truly shows the strength of unity and the human spirit. Their legacy lives on in the hearts of everyone who hears their stories. So, if you ever find yourself up against tough odds, remember this. It wasn't their size or strength that made the Vikings so fierce. It was their spirit. Think of the Vikings and the shield wall brotherhood as a shining example. Their tale shows us that even the smallest groups can achieve the impossible when they stand together, united and unbreakable. They faced foes stronger and better armed, yet they emerged victorious. In the end, it was their unbreakable bond and commitment to one another that made them truly unstoppable. Their loyalty and trust, built through countless battles, shone through. When it was time to form the shield wall, they moved without a second thought, their shields locking together to create an unyielding barrier against enemy attacks. Standing shoulder to shoulder, they faced every challenge, knowing they were more than just warriors. They were a brotherhood, united and strong. They were a brotherhood, united by a common goal and shared fate. Every warrior knew his role and what was expected. There was no room for doubt. If even one faltered, it could change everything. Victory or defeat hung in the balance. Even with danger all around, the Vikings stayed cool, moving with fluidity and precision. Shields clashed, swords met with a fierce sound, and the air buzzed with the chaos of battle. Some Vikings even went as far as sacrificing animals or humans to please the gods and earn their favor. Whether those sacrifices worked or not is a mystery, but they were definitely a big part of Viking culture. They proudly share tales of their adventures in France and England. Ragnar stands strong at the front, his shield raised high and his axe glinting as he takes down anyone who dares approach. With a swift, coordinated move, they turn and strike, their shield wall transforming into a battering ram that crashes into the enemy's defenses. The Franks are caught off guard, their ranks shattered by the Vikings' surprise attack. Seizing the moment, the Vikings push forward, driving the Franks back to seek refuge behind their city walls. With their shield wall holding strong, the Vikings have once again shown the power of their brotherhood, taking down a larger force and claiming a hard-earned victory. But the Franks aren't backing down. Their attacks just keep getting fiercer. Just when it looks like the Vikings might be overwhelmed, reinforcements roll in. More Vikings jump into the action, their shields bolstering the wall, while swords and axes gleam in the sunlight. Together, they fight as one, their discipline and training shining through in every move. Even after countless victories, their thirst for glory is as strong as ever. So, they sharpened their weapons, gearing up for the dawn, ready to tackle whatever challenges come their way. Among them are some seriously skilled craftsmen who've come to trade in the bustling port of Dorestad. The whole village is alive and buzzing with preparations. Ragnar leads the charge, his axe gleaming in the sunlight as he takes down anyone in his path. He fights like he's got the strength of 10 men, his armor soaking up enemy blows while he hacks and slashes at his foes. To those watching, Ragnar seems almost superhuman in his strength and bravery. Finally, the last of the Frankish defenders falls, and the Vikings celebrate their hard-won victory. With their shield wall still standing strong, they've once again shown just how powerful their bond and teamwork really are. As the Frankish defenders start to tire, Ragnar leads a final charge, breaking through their lines and sending them fleeing in fear. He rallies his men, giving the go-ahead for the attack. As the sun climbs higher, the Frankish king's troops step out from behind the city walls. For a moment, both sides face off, sizing each other up, ready for what's next. Then the battle cry rings out, and the Vikings charge forward. With their shields locked tight, they push hard, driving the Franks back toward the city gates. For a moment, it looks like the Franks might hold their ground, but the Vikings' relentless attack is just too much. They break through the Frankish lines, sending enemies scattering in all directions. With their shield wall strong, the Vikings chase down the fleeing enemies, cutting them down and taking prisoners. Soon, the streets are filled with the fallen and the wounded. For a Viking warrior, there's nothing quite like the thrill of plunder. So, how did they pull off such amazing tactics, using the terrain and sheer terror to beat the odds? This is the epic tale of the Shield Wall Brotherhood. Ragnar and his men prepare to defend their hard-won prize. They know that the Frankish king will not give up without a fight, and they must be ready for whatever comes next. As the sun dips lower, casting long shadows across the battlefield, the Vikings huddle behind their shield wall, ready for the fight ahead. Ragnar stands at the front, his face set with determination, fully aware that the fate of their hard-earned victory is on the line. Ragnar, the fearless leader of the Shield Wall Brotherhood, is famous for his battle skills, clever tactics, and unyielding courage. With his eyes fixed on the horizon, he seems to gaze beyond the flickering campfire light. His mind drifts back to the excitement of last night's raid, a memory that still fuels his spirit. The memory of that victory is still fresh in his mind, and he knows tomorrow will bring a new challenge. Word has spread about the Shield Wall Brotherhood's might, and the Frankish king's elite troops are gearing up to defend their city. It's 8:65 at D, and we're in the Kattegat, a narrow strait between the Danish island of Funen and the Swedish coast. Under a thick blanket of fog, a fleet of longships is lying in wait, ready for whatever comes next. Emerging from the mist, a Frankish merchant ship comes into view. In just moments, it'll be caught by the long hooks dropping from the Viking ships, pulling it in like a fish on a line. Suddenly, the peaceful morning is shattered by the screams of men and the clash of steel. Aboard the longships are 60 elite Viking warriors, proud members of the Shield Wall Brotherhood. It's their duty to hold the line, a true honor given only to the most skilled and loyal fighters. As dawn breaks over the misty seas, the Vikings feast and gear up for the day ahead. Among the revelers, a tall, muscular warrior with flowing red hair sits quietly, enjoying his meal. Ragnar is ready for whatever comes next. By 7 o'clock am, the battle is in full swing, and the Vikings are feeling victorious, but not letting it go to their heads. In Norse mythology, the gods play a huge part in Viking life, guiding their fates. As the sun dips below the horizon and night creeps in, the Vikings hold their ground, their shield wall standing strong against the brewing storm. Even though they are outnumbered, their shields create a solid barrier against enemy attacks. As the battle heats up, the Vikings pull off a clever feint, pretending to retreat and drawing the Franks into a trap. Even in the chaos, it's clear that the true strength of the Shield Wall Brotherhood comes from the deep bonds that tie them together. It was their unity that made them strong. The battle is on. Swords are clashing, and the air is thick with raw power. Picture this: warriors draped in bearskins, fierce and unstoppable. These guys weren't your average soldiers. They were the elite, channeling the spirit of the bear to strike fear into their enemies. According to these accounts, a berserker's rage could be triggered by various factors, such as a need for vengeance, a desire to protect their comrades, or even the intoxicating atmosphere of battle itself. Once they hit that state, these warriors felt no pain or fear, pulling of strength and endurance that seemed downright superhuman. And guess what? Pliny the Elder, the Roman naturalist, talked about a Celtic tribe that whipped up a special drink from mushrooms and henbane to pump up their warriors with courage and strength. The Vikings placed great emphasis on honor, bravery, and strength, and the berserker ideal embodied these values. The warrior ethos permeated Viking society, and young boys were often trained from a young age to be fierce and fearless fighters. This emphasis on martial prowess and the glorification of violence may have contributed to the emergence and popularity of the berserker phenomenon. These accounts, along with others, suggest that the use of psychoactive substances may have been widespread in ancient cultures, including the Norsemen. The ritual was believed to have been named after Guttorm, a legendary Viking warrior. These practices were designed to invoke the blessings of the gods and to tap into a primal force that lay dormant within them. The details of the berserker's call or Guttorm's oath vary depending on the source and the specific beliefs of the practitioners. However, some common elements included making offerings to the gods, typically in the form of weapons or other valuable items, as well as self-mutilation such as cutting or scarring the body. According to Norse tradition, Guttorm was a hero of superhuman strength and courage who led his people to victory in numerous battles. The historical basis for these practices is unclear, and much of what we know comes from later sagas and poems that may have embellished or distorted the actual customs of Viking culture. Or would you rather watch from the sidelines as these ferocious warriors engage in their terrifying rituals before charging into battle? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling tales of history's greatest warriors. Until next time, remember, in the realm of the berserkers, the line between man and beast is razor thin. Nonetheless, the berserker's call remains an iconic symbol of the Viking warrior ethos, representing the ultimate expression of martial prowess and devotion to the gods. He was said to have possessed the ability to enter a trance-like state during combat, a state that granted him immense power and resilience. Some researchers have suggested that certain physiological responses, such as an increase in adrenaline and testosterone, could have contributed to the berserker's heightened aggression and strength. No one could withstand the fury of a man who had tapped into the raw power of the gods. Men were cut down like wheat before a scythe, their heads rolling across the battlefield like grotesque bowling balls. The berserker's frenzy was unstoppable until his strength began to fail him, or the battle was won. Then the transformation would end and the berserker would collapse, spent and exhausted, but victorious. Additionally, neurological mechanisms such as altered brain activity and the release of neurotransmitters like dopamine may have been involved in inducing the berserker's frenzied state. Once the offerings were made and the self-mutilation completed, the warrior would enter into a state of frenzy and heightened awareness. He became a raging beast, a force of nature that could not be stopped. His strength was amplified, his endurance became limitless, and his aggression knew no bounds. The berserker was truly an embodiment of the gods on earth, a living weapon of mass destruction. This state, known as berserkgang or bear gate, was said to be a transformative experience that allowed the warrior to tap into superhuman strength, endurance, and aggression. They were the cream of the crop. Scholars continue to debate and explore various factors that may have contributed to the berserker's trance-like state, including cultural, psychological, physiological, and neurological aspects. What if you had the power to enter a state of heightened awareness, a state of pure strength and endurance, impervious to pain and fear? For some, this might sound like a fantasy, a mere figment of imagination. But for others, it was a reality they experienced firsthand, thanks to a practice known as the berserker's call. Further research and analysis of historical sources may shed more light on this enigmatic aspect of Viking history. One of the most intriguing theories suggests that berserkers consumed hallucinogenic potions or inhaled substances that induced a state of frenzy and heightened their senses. While there's no concrete evidence to support this theory, it aligns with the Norse descriptions of berserkers and similar practices documented in other cultures. These warriors were truly the best of the best, handpicked for their courage. Besides possible substance use, a mix of psychological and social factors also played a big part in the berserkers' wild trance. Their oath and mindset were key to this epic transformation. By making solemn vows and invoking their gods before battle, they created a sense of ritual and psychological preparation. This process likely involved a combination of intense emotions, including anger, excitement, and a willingness to sacrifice, all of which can trigger altered states of consciousness. Raw power and wild energy, right. But there's so much more to the berserker's transformation than just a crazy bloodlust. Let's dig in. Shields are shattering, and men are dropping like allies. Suddenly, what set these warriors apart was their knack for tapping into a primal force during battle, turning them into unstoppable, raging beasts. Legend has it that these warriors wore their skins not just to scare their enemies, but to channel the fierce power and ferocity of the bear itself. Some stories say these warriors painted their faces and bodies with wild designs, really mixing the lines between human and beast. And then there's this new sound cutting through the chaos of battle, noted by Arab and French scholars who stumbled upon these fierce fighters. Sure thing, here's the polished version. You can actually trace the roots of these fierce fighters back to earlier Norse traditions, shared through sagas and poems that were written down in the 13th and 14th centuries. These tales vividly describe a warrior who could unleash pure primal rage. He was feared not just for his strength and skill, but also for his wild look and fierce presence, a guttural roar that shook the very ground beneath him. From the corner of your eye, you spot a warrior charging into the chaos, eyes blazing with an eerie fire, teeth bared in a fierce snarl. With each swing of his sword, he takes down 2 or 3 foes before collapsing lifeless, his throat slashed open by his own blade. What did you just witness? Was it the madness of a warrior lost in bloodlust, or something darker, something primal that sets him apart from his fellow fighters? A berserker. These were elite Viking warriors who fought in a wild, trance-like state. The term berserker popped up in written records as early as the 9th century. Among the Norsemen, these legendary figures were admired for their ability to tap into a heightened awareness during battle, known as berserkanga, which literally means bear gait. There have been many theories proposed to explain the berserker's supposed capacity to enter a trance-like state and display superhuman abilities. For instance, the Greek historian Herodotus wrote about the Thracian War, parties who used a special drink made from the flower of the hemp plant to induce a state of frenzy and invincibility during battle. However, it is important to note that the use of such substances does not necessarily explain the full range of behaviors associated with the berserker phenomenon. Furthermore, the social context of Viking culture may have encouraged and reinforced the development of a berserker mentality. In addition to potential substance use and psychological factors, physiological and neurological aspects also likely played a role in the berserker's trance-like state. It is important to note that our understanding of the berserker phenomenon is still evolving, and there is no single theory that can fully explain this complex aspect of Viking culture. What if you could tap into a primal force within you? A force that would transform you into a raging beast, unstoppable and relentless. The berserker's call, also known as the Guttum's Oath, was a ritualistic practice said to have been performed by elite Viking warriors known as berserkers. In order to achieve this state, Guttum and other Viking warriors performed a series of rituals and took oaths before engaging in battle. The purpose of these offerings and mutilations was to demonstrate the warrior's devotion to the gods and their willingness to sacrifice anything, including their own flesh and blood, for victory in battle. In this state, the berserker was no longer constrained by the limitations of ordinary human beings. As the berserker raged into battle, his opponents were terrified. It is important to note that while the berserker's call or Guttum's oath is a fascinating aspect of Norse tradition, it's also shrouded in myth and legend. Would you dare to make the call yourself to become a berserker? What did Vikings use their longships for? Honestly, they used them for everything. Trade, raiding, exploring the sea was their highway. Picture this: standing barefoot on the deck of a brand new longship, feeling the wood spring beneath your feet. It's a totally different vibe from a modern ship, right? This is a clinker-built vessel, featuring overlapping planks stitched together with rawhide thongs and sealed with masts to keep water out. We're going to dive into the design and construction of these incredible ships and discover what it was like to sail on one. From the 8th to the 11th centuries, Vikings dominated the seas. Their longships were not just fast and agile, they were also deadly, with shallow keels that let them glide through shallow waters for surprise attacks on coastal towns. The longship was super versatile, letting Vikings travel far and wide. They explored new lands, traded goods, and raided settlements. Basically, these ships were key for everything from trade to exploration to warfare. One famous battle involved the kings Halfdan the Black and Gudfred the Mighty. Halfdan's longship fleet was outnumbered by Gudfred's, but he pulled off an incredible victory thanks to his ship's awesome maneuverability. This win helped Halfdan unite Norway and build a strong kingdom. Longships were truly essential for the Vikings in exploring, trading, and waging war. Their significance is still alive today. If you're into history or just appreciate incredible engineering, Viking longships are totally worth diving into. Want to know more about these fantastic vessels? Check out the resources in the description below. And guess what? Many legendary Viking raids and battles happened right on these longships. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Your support helps us keep bringing history to life for everyone. Until next time, happy sailing. And remember, these longships are not just vessels. They symbolize the Viking Age and the incredible seafaring culture of Scandinavia. Many museums around the globe have reconstructed longships, letting visitors check out these incredible vessels up close. One of the best places to see preserved Viking ships is the Viking Ship Museum in Denmark. They've got 3 real Viking ships on display, including the Rose, a massive cargo ship that was discovered buried in a Danish burial mound. The ship measures over 35 meters, or 115 feet long, making it one of the largest Viking ships ever found. Then there's the Havingston, a 33-meter, or 108-foot warship discovered in a bog in Denmark. It's famous for its stunning carvings, including a pair of fierce dragon heads mounted on the bowsprit. And let's not forget about the Gorm the Old ship, which is 23 meters, or 75 feet long, and was unearthed in a grave in Jelling, Denmark. This ship is named after King Gorm the Old, who ruled Denmark back in the 900s AD. In 793 AD, a group of Vikings launched a surprise attack on the monastery of Lindisfarne in England. They rolled in with a fleet of longships, landing and striking without warning. This raid kicked off the Viking Age, a time when Vikings carried out raids on coastal communities all over Europe. Stick around as we dive into what made the longship so special and why it still matters today. These ships were long and narrow, which made them perfect for navigating the rough waters of the North Sea and Baltic Sea. They established trading posts and built settlements in many different lands, and their longships were the key to their success. One of the most famous Viking explorers was Eric the Red, who discovered Iceland and Greenland. He was a notorious figure who had been exiled from Norway for murder, but when he arrived in Iceland, he saw the potential for settlement and began to build a community there. He also explored Greenland and was responsible for the establishment of the first Viking settlement there. They also had high sides, which gave them a lot of stability and made them less likely to capsize. The average length of a longship was around 50 meters or 164 feet, but some could be over 100 meters or 328 feet long. They also had a shallow draft, which is the distance from the top of the ship to the waterline. This allowed them to sail in relatively shallow water and sneak up on their enemies. But it's surprisingly flexible. A longship's hull was made from oak, an incredibly strong hardwood, but also one that was flexible. Longships were typically made from wood, either oak or pine. Life on a longship wasn't easy. The crew lived and slept on the ship, and they had to work hard to keep it on course. The crew consisted of both men and women, and they would have worked together to row the ship, hoist the sails, and maneuver the ship through the water. Of course, we can't forget about the longship's most important feature, the dragon head at the bowsprit. This was more than just a decorative carving. It symbolized the ship's power and ferocity. The dragon's head was often painted to look like a snarling beast, and it was meant to intimidate the ship's enemies. The wood was carefully selected, and the planks were sewn together using a technique called clinker building. This method involved overlapping the planks and fastening them together with iron rivets. The result was a strong, flexible ship that could withstand the rigors of sea travel. The longship also had a single mast with a square sail, which helped them catch the wind and move quickly through the water. Here at the channel, we bring history to life. Join us and let your knowledge grow. And this flexibility allowed the ship to move through the water with less resistance than any other ship of its day. Also, thanks to its shallow keel, it could sail in very shallow water. It could go places no other warships could. Up rivers, into the Arctic Circle, across the North Sea, and even down south to the coast of Africa. Vikings were seafarers. They travelled all over, and their ships played a key role in this. Now, longships were built all over Scandinavia, but the most famous ones came from the town of Otau. This was the royal shipyard where the kings of Norway got their ships built. Look inside one of these magnificent creations. The interior of a longship wasn't just about function, it was about fearsome looks. The runic inscription reads, "The Serpent's Way," and it shows a dragon head at the bowsprit, which would have been carved and painted to look like a snarling beast. The longship was a war machine. It was designed to cut through the waves and smash into enemy ships. but it was also a tool for trade and exploration. And now we can show you what it really meant to be on a Viking longship. You're about to embark on an epic journey back to the Viking Age. But first, welcome aboard. Welcome to our video on the ship that ruled the sea. But what exactly is a longship? Well, the word longship isn't just a cool name. It's actually a description of the ship's shape. Now, let's talk about how these ships were built. Okay, now that you know a bit about the ship's construction, let's talk about what it was like to sail on one. Longships played a major role in Viking culture. Another famous Viking longship battle took place in 866 AD at the Battle of Hafrsfjord in Norway. Longships were also used for exploration and trade. Vikings were known to travel all over Europe, the British Isles, and even North America. Viking longships are still important today. They are a testament to the ingenuity and skill of the Viking people. Viking longships are a fascinating part of history. These ships aren't just relics of the past. It's time for your strategy session. Do you want to rule like a king? Maybe rule like an emperor? The new update Conquest and Settlement is out now on Steam Early Access, and you can conquer all of Europe with your Viking army. But if you just have the base game, that might be a little bit tricky. I'm going to focus on the sail option, because it has the best starting position. As you can see, this area of Scandinavia is just a mess of duchies, and there aren't any kings or emperors to really answer to. For example, there's raids, which is an entire new combat system where you can sack settlements and take prisoners and loot, just like a real Viking. Raids have a different interface, and a different style of battle than normal warfare. You're not trying to wipe out the entire enemy force. Scotland is an option, but I'm not sure how well that would go. And it feels like there are only so many places I can go before I run into serious trouble. I was hoping for more interaction with the Byzantine Empire and the Abbasid Caliphate, but so far I haven't even seen either of them. First, the raids need to work better. I feel like there are too many moving parts. I hope they make it so you can found new cultures, and maybe add some unique buildings and units. If you have the base game though, I definitely recommend you get the free patch, because there are some cool new features, and it is fun to play around with marriage and the new settlement buildings. If you want to learn more about Crusader Kings 3, check out my beginner guide series. Or if you want to see more about this update, check out my DEV Diary series. Thank you to my supporters for making videos like this possible. It would be awesome to see more unique interactions with other empires, and maybe some events where you choose between pillaging or settling. Possibilities are really endless, and it's too fiddly to manage your prisoners, your cargo, and your forces. It would be great if they made it simpler and faster. Second, I think there need to be more valuable targets to attack. Where are all the riches from the east? The silks, the spices, where are they? It feels like there's so much potential to explore. You've got your Viking units and all this amazing culture and tech, but it just seems like there's nothing else to dive into. Why can't I raid Constantinople? Honestly, I feel like this mode isn't quite there yet. And let's be real, the raid mode needs some work too. You've got your fleet, but I really wish there were more exotic goods, agents, and maybe even a piracy system to spice things up. It just feels like something's missing, you know. I was excited to command massive fleets and navies, but my fleet is already top tier, and I've hardly ventured out of Scandinavia. Plus, there aren't enough high-value targets to hit. The easy pickings get snatched up way too fast. Sure, there are some cool features, but it's pretty similar to the sail mode, just starting with a PI-made fleet. I could always head east to try and take Constantinople, but wow, that sounds like a tough battle. In theory, a single battle felt like a breeze, especially with Aquitaine looking like an easy win. But honestly, I was getting overwhelmed and dragged down by some pretty bad AI. Plus, if you keep too many prisoners or treat them poorly, you'll end up with negative modifiers. You end up raiding for a few years, and honestly, it gets boring, so you settle down anyway. The downside, you lose half your fleet every year, which is a real drag. Plus, starting with such a small force means you are constantly battling against bigger armies. I tried to hold of the English once, and wow, it was super frustrating. On the flip side, sail mode feels way better. You can take your time, grow your power gradually, and you don't have to stress about losing half your army every single year. The raid mode just feels like a chore, and the excitement, it's just not there. Maybe I should have just aimed for Constantinople instead. Wait, hold on a second. There are some cool mechanics in play here. You can build these new structures when you land in fresh territory, which lets you collect taxes and raise troops. Oh, and I noticed you brought in reinforcements. I came into this update feeling pretty excited, but keeping the momentum going has been a bit tough. By the way, how long do you think it takes to build a fleet? You're really just trying to grab a few buildings and scare them off, right? I'll definitely come back to this when it's all polished up. There are settlements to explore. And here's something cool. Your ships will earn renown, a new resource that helps you hire special units and level up your kingdom. Plus, sailing brings some unique events your way, like choosing where to settle or even bumping into legendary figures from history, like Ragnar Lothbrok. And the best part, the AI is set up differently, so as a Viking, you can expect your FOs to act in ways that really challenge your raiding and settling plans. England and Francia are both falling apart, and there are a bunch of weak kingdoms in between. Plus, your dynasty's wealth is now a hidden stat that influences things like marriage proposals and how much land you can kick off with. Oh, and there are some cool UI updates that make it way easier to find what you need and keep track of your counties. This map shows how much land you control compared to the whole thing. Super handy, right? If you're feeling adventurous, you could totally set sail for Ireland or even Russia, but watch out, those places can be pretty risky. My granddad kicked off the war with Mercia, and I just swooped in to finish off Northumbria. That's the cool thing about being a raider. You can jump into wars whenever you want, and you don't have to worry about the complicated rules of succession. If you kick the bucket, your sons just take over your fleet and keep conquering. So, I hit up Ireland, raided a few settlements, and set up my base in Dublin. Things got tricky when I snagged some prisoners, only to get raided myself. Gotta be smart with those prisoners. If you let them go after a bit, they'll totally forget about it, and your relations with that kingdom will get a nice boost. So, I set my sights on France and decided to invade. I won the first few battles easily, but then I ran into the Frankish king, and that's when my luck took a nosedive. That guy totally wiped me out and sent me packing back to Scandinavia. Now, I'm hanging out in Brittany, trying to build up another fleet. The further I sail from Scandinavia, the tougher it gets to manage my ships. So, I'm thinking it's smarter to stick closer to home for now. And sail basically lets you choose which nation you want to play, as when you sail out of Scandinavia in the 800s and you want to establish your dynasty across Europe. You've got 3 awesome options, each with their own perks and starting gear. First up, we have the Northmen, who kick things off with 1 county in Sweden and some vassals that aren't landed yet. They also get a boost in fleet power and start with an extra ship. Then, there are the Dublin Vikings, based in Ireland, who come with some sweet trading bonuses right from the get-go. And then there are the Western Vikings, who are a bit like the Northmen, but you begin in Western Norway instead of Sweden. Each of these options is solid, but I really like the Northmen. It's just way easier to grow your territory when you start with those initial counties. No worries though, with the new DLC, you'll be making big moves to conquer the continent in no time. Today, we're diving into how you can go from zero to the most powerful empire in Europe. Let's get into it. Hey there, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm your host, and I'm all about strategy games. Today, we're diving into Crusader Kings 3 and its exciting new DLC. I don't usually cover early access stuff, but this one's a game changer. Let's get right into it. So, what's this DLC all about? It introduces 2 fresh ways to dive into the game, Sail and Raider. You can't choose your exact settlement spot, but you've got some options to play around with. If you're new to this, you might be asking yourself why you pick these modes instead of just jumping into a regular game, right? Another cool update is the marriage mechanic. When you tie the knot, you score some diplomatic power and a bit of gold based on your spouse's dynasty wealth. So, here's where I'm at. I just wrapped up conquering northern England, but honestly, I'm not quite sure where to head next. So, that's my take on things so far. Honestly, the raid mode feels like the weaker link here. I see some real potential in this update, but it definitely needs a few tweaks. But hey, it's early access, right? The devs can still make changes, and I'm really looking forward to what's next for this DLC. In conclusion, I don't think this DLC is worth buying right now. When the Vikings went to war, they did so with the full backing of the gods. They claimed to fight in the name of Odin, the god of wisdom and death. We need to explore what made them tick, what fueled their desire for conquest, and what they hoped to achieve through war. Let's take a deep dive into the emotional heart of Viking warfare. And when they raised their axes and shouted their war cries, it was Odin's bloodlust they tapped into. The warriors were highly respected and celebrated for their bravery, strength, and skill in battle. Warfare was seen as a means to achieve personal and societal honor, and the spoils of war were highly coveted. This belief in an afterlife where warriors were rewarded for their bravery and skill in battle was a powerful motivator in Viking warfare. It inspired warriors to fight with courage and determination, knowing that their deeds in battle would be remembered and rewarded. Sometimes sacrifices took the form of animal sacrifice, typically of livestock such as pigs or bulls. The inscription mentions a man named Rurik who sacrificed his son in order to honor Odin and to seek his favor. Such acts of human sacrifice were likely rare and were probably reserved for very special occasions. The runes would be cast in a specific pattern or layout depending on the purpose of the casting. Funerary practices among the Vikings were a reflection of their religious beliefs and their reverence for their warriors. In this practice, the body was placed in a large boat along with the warriors' weapons, armor, and other possessions. Funerary practices were not only a way to honor the dead, but also a way to celebrate their lives and achievements. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. Your support means everything to us. Thanks for watching. The Vikings believed that those who died in battle had achieved a great honor, and their burials were a way to commemorate this achievement and to celebrate the warrior's life. The boat was then buried in a mound or left on the shore to be washed away by the sea. Another common burial practice was the cremation burial, in which the body was burned on a funeral pyre. The ashes were then collected and placed in a burial urn or buried in a mound. In some cases, the bones of the warrior were divided among family members, who kept them in their homes as relics. When a warrior died in battle, they were typically given a burial that honored their bravery and celebrated their achievements in battle. The Vikings believed that those who died in battle were particularly blessed by the gods and were destined for a place in Valhalla. Therefore, their burials were often more elaborate than those of non-warriors. For example, in a simple 3-rune spread, the first rune represented the past, the second the present, and the third the future. Once the runes had been cast, the reader would interpret the meanings of the runes and their positions to provide insight or guidance. Rune casting was used for a variety of purposes, including divination, fortune telling, and even healing. The Vikings believed that the runes were a powerful tool that could be used to gain knowledge and understanding of the future or to seek help from the gods or spirits. It is important to note that the sources of information about Viking beliefs and practices are often biased or incomplete, making it difficult to fully understand their religious beliefs and practices. Some of the information we have comes from Christian sources who often had a negative view of Viking religion and may have exaggerated or distorted certain practices in order to portray the Vikings as barbaric and heathenish. In other cases, human sacrifice was used, typically of slaves or prisoners of war. Rune casting, also known as rune reading or rune scrying, was a practice used by the Vikings to gain insight into the future or to seek guidance from their gods. The Vikings believed that each rune had its own meaning and that by casting runes, they could receive messages from the gods or from the spirits of their ancestors. Rune casting was used for various purposes, including divination, fortune telling, and even healing. The Vikings believed that the runes were a powerful tool that could be used to gain knowledge and understanding of the future or to seek help from the gods or spirits. Human sacrifice was a controversial practice and was not widely accepted among the Vikings. However, there is evidence that it was used on rare occasions, especially in times of great crisis or when making sacrifices to Odin. After the battle, the victors would often engage in rituals to honor their gods and celebrate their victories. They would make offerings and sacrifices, and they would hold feasts and ceremonies to commemorate their fallen comrades. These rituals were a way of giving thanks for the blessings of victory and of honoring the gods who had granted it. The art of war was taught from a young age, and the Vikings developed sophisticated military tactics and strategies that they employed in their conflicts with other peoples. In the sagas, stories of battles, raids, and the lives of legendary heroes, we find a compelling depiction of the Viking mindset towards war, one that reveals a society steeped in ritual, revenge, and raids. The Vikings were a superstitious people who believed in a complex pantheon of gods and goddesses. They practiced a form of polytheism known as North European paganism, which had a profound influence on their beliefs and practices, including those related to warfare. Sacrifices played a significant role in Viking religion and were often associated with their beliefs regarding death and the afterlife. The Vikings believed that the god Odin was particularly interested in human sacrifice, and it was common for them to make offerings to him before going into battle.
The idea behind these sacrifices was to show Odin that they were willing to give up something precious, their own blood or the blood of another person, in order to gain his favor.
By doing so, they hoped to increase their chances of success in battle, and to ensure that they would be welcomed into Valhalla after death.
They believed that their gods and goddesses had a direct interest in human affairs, particularly in matters of war and violence.
For example, Odin, the god of wisdom and death, was often invoked before battle, and warriors would make offerings to him in the hopes of gaining favor in battle.
But to truly understand the Vikings, we need to go beyond the clash of steel and the thud of bodies hitting the ground.
The Vikings were known for their ferocious fighting skills and their willingness to engage in warfare both on land and at sea.
They were a formidable force to be reckoned with.
But what motivated them to go to war?
What were the driving forces behind their military campaigns? As their population grew, the Vikings sought to expand their settlements and establish new homes in foreign lands. They conquered and settled in areas such as Britain, Ireland, France, and even North Africa, establishing their own kingdoms and imposing their dominance on the local populations.
Land and sea were the Vikings' first concern, and all other considerations came after that. One of the primary motivations for Viking warfare was the pursuit of wealth and plunder. The Vikings were a highly mobile and adaptable people who were skilled at seafaring and exploration. They traveled extensively throughout Europe, the British Isles, and even the shores of North America, driven by a thirst for knowledge and a desire to push the boundaries of their world. They established trading posts and settlements along their travels, leaving their mark on the lands they visited. The Vikings raided and pillaged on monasteries and coastal towns, seeking to acquire valuable goods such as gold, silver, and precious artifacts.
They also engaged in trade, but their methods often bordered on piracy as they targeted merchant ships carrying valuable merchandise.
Another significant reason for Viking warfare was the desire for land and territory. In addition to these material pursuits, Viking warfare was also driven by a sense of adventure and a desire for glory. Furthermore, Viking warfare was deeply ingrained in their culture and society.
Let's dive into the rituals and customs of Viking warfare, shall we?
Odin, the god of death and the afterlife, was a big deal for them.
Warriors who fell in battle believed they could earn a spot in Valhalla. Now, let's chat about one important part of their lives: sacrifices to Odin. The inscription reveals a fascinating human sacrifice made to Odin.
Now, let's chat about rune casting.
Runes were super important in Viking culture and were used for all sorts of things, like divination and fortune telling.
Oh, and did you know the most common burial for a warrior was a ship burial? Pretty wild, right? Let me know what surprised you in the comments below.
Practices like these show just how much the Vikings valued their warriors and their belongings. They really wanted to honor the status and achievements of their fallen heroes.
Sacrifices to Odin were often quite elaborate, filled with rituals and ceremonies to pay respect to the god and prove their loyalty.
You might have heard about the famous Giro stone, right?
And when it came to casting runes, a Viking would usually use a set of 24 runes carved on stones or wood.
Let's dive into how warriors were buried during the Viking Age. What are your thoughts on Viking warfare?
The campfire crackles merrily in the night, casting flickering shadows on the faces of the assembled Vikings. They are gathered here to listen to the saga of their mighty chieftain who has just returned home after many years of raiding, pillaging, exploring and fighting across Europe and beyond. This is the final episode of our series on the greatest warriors from Northern Europe's Viking Age, which ran from roughly the 8th to the 11th centuries.
We've done episodes on the Varangian, Rus and Norman warriors, each of whom have unique traits and skills that set them apart from other Northern European fighters.
In this episode, however, we're going to talk about the quintessential Viking warrior, the fierce, hardy and legendary Viking berserker. The old Viking grows quieter. As the first rays of sunlight begin to peek over the horizon, the old Viking falls silent. He looks up at the sky. Even today, we can feel the echo of their legacy as we explore the ruins of their great cities, raid their burial mounds, and learn about their way of life. For the Viking berserkers were more than just warriors.
They were explorers, traders, farmers, and above all, human beings.
They were also skilled traders, explorers, and farmers.
They were husbands, fathers, and brothers. They were real people with hopes and dreams, fears and aspirations, just like us.
Let us remember them not just as ferocious fighters, but as complex individuals who lived full and meaningful lives. They had hopes and dreams, fears and aspirations, just like us.
A faraway look on his face. As we bring this series to a close, let us take a moment to remember all of the great warriors we've talked about. Each one was a master of their craft, feared and respected by their enemies and revered by their allies. Their legacy lives on in the hearts and minds of those who came after them.
The Normans, the Russ and modern Scandinavians all carry on the traditions of their Viking ancestors.
They speak their language, share their cultural values and honor their memory.
The Viking Age may have ended, but their story continues to be written. Together, they form the backbone of the northern European armies that swept across the known world, leaving an indelible mark on history. Be bold, be fearless, and be honorable.
For the spirit of the Vikings lives on in all of us. So there you have it, the end of our series on the greatest warriors from Northern Europe's Viking Age.
We hope you've enjoyed learning about these amazing people and their incredible feats.
Hey, if you're enjoying this, don't forget to hit that like button for more awesome stuff.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
It's time for me to go now, he says gently.
My time has come. The other Vikings nod, understanding.
They understand that when a man has truly lived, when he's done all he could, and seen all he wanted to see, it's time to let go.
They gather around their chieftain, placing their hands on his shoulders, their faces shining with respect and admiration. You've lived well, chieftain, they say.
You fought bravely and led us to victory.
We will never forget you. With those heartfelt words, the old Viking closes his eyes and peacefully passes on, his spirit joining the great hall of the gods.
His voice, once booming and loud, now becomes softer and slower, echoing tales of the Viking raiders who shaped history.
These fierce warriors would go on to conquer England in 1066, leaving their mark on the language and culture of the island nation. Meanwhile, the Rus would rise as a major power in Eastern Europe, controlling vital trade routes and raiding deep into Asia.
They even embraced Christianity, becoming some of the most devoted followers of the new faith. Yet, through all these changes, the memory of the Viking berserkers lives on, forever etched in the hearts of those who remember their incredible legacy. His eyes, once sharp and bright, now grow dim and distant.
He shares stories of battles fought in far-off lands, of raids he led and treasures he won.
He talks about the comrades he lost and the victories he achieved, his voice trailing off into the night, as if he's reliving those epic moments all over again.
But hey, he's older now, carrying the scars of countless battles and hardships. In the years after the Viking Age, Europe would be forever changed by the Vikings' incredible impact. Their longboats sailed the seas, journeying from the icy waters of Scandinavia to the sunny shores of the Mediterranean, showcasing the power of the North.
Their swords and axes clashed with the finest warriors of the south, and their ships were the envy of every navy around. But as the Viking Age drew to a close, so did the era of the great Viking warriors. Yet their legacy would live on in the hearts and minds of those they left behind.
After a lifetime of fighting and traveling, he's finally ready to settle down and live out the rest of his days in peace.
But though he is eager to trade in his sword for a farmer's hoe, he knows that there's one thing that won't change: his love of a good story.
So as the fire crackles merrily in the night, he settles down beside the other Vikings and asks them to gather close. When they do, he begins to tell them tales of his exploits, each one more exciting than the last. And though his heart still burns with the fire of adventure, he knows that his time for sailing the seas is over. We hear about how the Vikings traded in the far-off lands of the north, where the sun barely sets in the summer, and how they encountered strange and wonderful creatures that no one back home had ever seen before. We hear about the great feasts they had in the mead halls, how the warriors would drink and sing and tell stories of their own deeds until the ale flowed like water and the mead was spilled freely. Now it is time to settle down and pass on the tales of his deeds to the next generation. So grab a mug of ale and settle down, because we're about to hear some epic stories. Hello, my friends.
Welcome to another episode. Today we are talking about Legacy of Fire and Iron, the Viking echo through time.
Returning home, the old Viking has come home.
We hear about the time he and his crew sailed to the Byzantine Empire and fought against the armies of the Caliphate, how their mighty swords and axes cut through the enemy ranks like butter. As the night goes on, we dive into the Viking legacy. The Normans, too, carry these epic tales, with stories of their incredible feats passed down through generations, sparking awe in all who hear them. And while their time on Earth may have ended long ago, their spirit lives on in the very land they once called home. But let us not forget that war is not the only thing that these warriors were known for.